Hi everyone, my name is Ariana Miller and I'm here today to talk about something that I've researched here at WashU for the last 5 weeks. Now, for those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm a rising senior and I have been at WashU for the last 5 weeks studying Introduction to Cultural Anthropology and doing this research project that I'll be talking about. I'm going to be a prospective political science major, so a lot of this is playing into interests of mine, including the fields of political science and sociology. First off, I just want to say that I am an emancipated minor. An emancipated minor is someone who assumes adult responsibilities before reaching the age of 18. This is kind of a foreign topic for some people. Some people may have never heard of this. Some people may have heard of it because of Will Smith's son, Jaden, saying that he was going to get emancipated, which he didn't, by the way. And I really just want to make light of the issues that emancipated minors face because it's not really talked about, and that's something that I figured out while doing my research. There wasn't a lot of research on emancipated minors, not very many statistics, and something that I learned while going through the process of emancipation and living as an emancipated minor is that there are no programs out there designed specifically for us. Now, that is an issue that I will be going into today, and I'll be presenting a program that I created. So, I think that the best way to actually go about this is introducing the program that I created. Now, the program that I created is called EMFAP, that is EMFAP, and that is short for Emancipated Minor Financial Assistance Program. Now, I do want to tell you, if you see me looking off like right here, I have my research essay right in front of me. That way I have quick access to the resources and the different studies that I researched so that I can give you the most in-depth dive into my research. EMFAP is a financial institution that I designed to suppress the financial burdens that us emancipated minors face on a daily basis. This is something that no one really talks about because of the fact that there are little statistics. There's no one who knows that this is an issue. This is something that I would not have known was an issue unless I got emancipated, which I did. That's why I'm here. And so this is something that I want to enlighten people on, and I want to make sure that people are aware of because it really is an issue. Now, we do qualify for all of the usual programs such as SNAP and TAMP. However, the biggest thing that you need to know, and this is something I researched, was how the United States addresses its social safety net. And that is something that I actually go really into depth with. So, according to a comparative study on Sweden and the United States, which was conducted by Martha Ozawa, sorry, I may be pronouncing that wrong, researchers believe that the U.S. policy was formulated on the basis that the socioeconomic conditions that single mothers and other female-headed families face that are poor are because of their own faults. And on top of that, U.S. policy and programs that were created were designed to react to the poor socioeconomic conditions and emergencies that U.S. families face, as opposed to making programs and implementing programs to prevent those crises from happening, which is a problem, and I will dive deeper into that. And so U.S. social welfare programs were designed to help families, not individuals. And we can see this with TAMP, which is Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. It's not individuals. Now, granted, you can get SNAP if you're an individual. I mean, I was on SNAP for a while. I have gotten the positive consequences from programs like that. However, that only helped my food assistance. It didn't help me with my bills and all the other toiletries that I have to get, all of the other expenses that I have. There are programs such as TAMP that are created, and I did not pursue that avenue because most of the time when I talk about these different programs or try to get the assistance such as SNAP, I run into barriers of people not understanding my case, not understanding that I am a legal adult and can access these resources, and just getting frustrated with me. I want to preface, it's not their fault. They were not trained to have these certain situations pop up. I know that I am a very rare case. However, it is very deterring to me because this is not something that I like to go through either, like it's hard. Sweden's policies, such as paid maternal and paternal leave, these are programs that help with the struggles that a person may encounter as both a worker and a parent. Maternal and paternal leave is instated to ensure that they don't fall into poor socioeconomic conditions because they had a child. Whereas SNAP, which is a US program, was instated to, hey, are you in a poor socioeconomic condition? Okay, I'm going to give you this resource and hopefully you will get out of that situation. So rather than focusing on the reaction to a crisis, one would think we would focus on implementing programs designed to prevent the financial crises from happening. To really put that in perspective, for example, we apply sunscreen to our skin to ensure that ultraviolet radiation does not severely damage it. Now, of course, some events will fall through, such as sunburn still occurring despite the sunscreen, skin cancer, but implementing a potentially seamless solution beforehand can certainly counteract some of the poor conditions and consequences from taking place. So now that we have kind of addressed how US policies were formed and that whole basis of it, let's talk about finances. Finances is always a glaring question in the room. Can we afford to pay for another social welfare program? And this is something that on both sides of the aisle, people are concerned about. Now, there's no secret that conservatives, they don't like social welfare spending. They think that it's not good. They don't want big government, so they go more towards private sector programs that are funded through churches and other organizations like that.
It is also really important to take into consideration the fact that private sectors simply do not have enough funds as of right now to pick up the slack that public sectors would leave if they become defunded. If we want private sectors to start to be the ones to supply financial assistance, we need to direct more funding to them.
Whereas the more liberal people go towards the public sector programs. But I do want to start this off by saying our future for this program, if implemented, is not bleak when it comes to finances. Going off of Ozawa's study, the United States spends 15 to 16% of its GDP on social welfare programs. Now, this is including Social Security, unemployment. If you want to dive deeper into that statistic, only 1.06% of the GDP is spent on child and family benefits. So 0.54% of the GDP goes to family cash benefits. That's programs such as TAMP. And the other 0.52% goes to family services and in-kind benefits, which is SNAP, foster care. So to properly conceptualize how EMFAP would fit into these statistics, I took TAMP funding into consideration. Now again, 0.54% of the GDP goes towards TAMP and other programs, accounting for less than 0.54% of the GDP. $31.6 billion is financed into TAMP each year. If we funneled even 10% of that figure into EMFAP, which is $3.16 billion a year, that would allow payments of $1,000 each month to 250,000 emancipated minors. That amount would only account for 0.054% of the GDP. And here is an image of what that would look like. And I'm not saying to direct funds from TAMP to that. I'm just saying that if we were to use a figure similar to that, it's very much doable. So the next factor I want to talk about that goes into emancipation is child abuse. Child abuse is one of the worst epidemics that our country faces. 1 in 4 children will experience maltreatment in their lifetime. Those who live in houses with parents who abuse substances are very common. 20% of infants are exposed to substances prenatally. 6 million children reside in a home with parents who abuse substances. I've had my own experience with substance abuse in my family. And I'm not really going to go into detail about that because it's not really something that the whole world needs to know. If you know, you know. And I just want to say that those who live in abusive households, mainly those households with substance abuse, are more likely to become a ward of the state or even seek emancipation. And unfortunately, those who seek emancipation usually fail in the early stages, and this is due to the fact that the case of substance and child abuse is more common in low socioeconomic statuses. So inevitably, these minors are going to go into these processes with little to no resources. This is really evident especially in rural communities. Now, I grew up in a rural community, and I am blessed to have the resources that I do, and to have been given the situation and the circumstances that I did. However, not every emancipated minor has that type of community who can uplift them. So diving deeper into becoming a ward of the state or going into foster care entrants have been on a rise since 2012. There have been many studies that have found that foster care is becoming a huge concern, whether that be the limited number of foster homes or the abuse that is found in the homes. There have been studies that have been done that show that the Title IV-A AFDC payments showed a lack of those payments showed a 17% increase in hazardous permanency. Let's say I was in a foster home, and my foster parents weren't being paid those payments, I would be more likely to move around. They wouldn't keep me. And I think the scariest part of that figure is not knowing whether that's just a failure on the foster care infrastructure, or if that just shows that some foster families are only in it for the money, or both. Either way, it's failing, and it's scary. Kinship placements are actually becoming more and more common as time goes on. In fact, 32% of children in foster care get sent to a kinship placement. Articles I've read on kinship placements say that they're amazing, that they do amazing things for the kids, and they have more contact with the parents. They just praise kinship placements. I think that the usage of success rates for kinship placements based on the contact and reunification with parents cannot be a reliable indicator. Children in homes with substance abuse are more likely to be placed in foster care, and if those children were to have a relationship with their parents who are abusing substances, they can endure a lot of trauma, and this can be due to a parent's promises of sobriety that don't end up being fulfilled. It could be to their manipulation. There was one study that was done in particular talking about how a mother's tendency to give permission to their child on their placement becomes more exercised in non-kinship placements. And some may say that this is a reason why kinship placements are more valuable and better. I would like you to sit here and ponder why you think the mother is more keen to approve of a kinship placement. Why should a mother who abused substances and put their kid in that situation have any say in where their child goes? There is overwhelming evidence that shows that some families with people who abuse substances are in complete denial of any issues going on. You know, I reference this frequently in my research project with examples of my own family being in denial about anything going on with substance abuse. In a way, it's kind of sad because it will hurt them, and I think that that's really sad because you're living a lie, basically, that you're telling yourself that, no, my sister would never abuse substances. Well, my sister's fine. My brother's fine. They would never do that to their kid. And sitting there in denial is not helping anyone. It's not helping yourself. It's not helping your sibling, your family member, and it's certainly not helping their children. A mother may be more apt to favor a kinship placement because that very kin may enable or ignore the abuse that happened, perhaps even knowing about it while it was happening and not doing anything. As I will state when discussing emancipation statutes, giving parents, especially those who are abusive, any power in what your child can do or where your child can go is not a good practice. So next, I want to talk about my main primary source that I used for my research project, and that was my decree of emancipation. Now, I mainly wanted to touch on this because there are 3 statutes that I find a problem with that I had to meet to become emancipated. I also realized the privilege that I had to meet some of these statutes. So the first statute that I have a problem with is the parents of blank have both signed and recorded their consent to the emancipation of blank. My concern with the first reference statute is that if the parents or legal guardians have to consent to the emancipation for it to be considered, This could lead to abusive parents inhibiting the process, even if emancipation is in the best interest of the child. This statute does have one exception, and that is if you prove to the judge that your parents have acquiesced, which is reluctantly accepted but not outright objected to you living away from them. I was fortunate to where I was living outside of my parents' houses, and they were not actively trying to get me to come home. So that did check off the acquiesced part if they decided to not consent to my emancipation. However, not every person has this, and that actually runs right next into this next statute, which is the petitioner, blank, has been residing outside of the home of her parents and or legal guardians for a period exceeding 12 months. Now, this obviously has issues. Let's put this in perspective of custody. When parents get divorced, and let's say residential custody was to your mom, and the court finds out that your mom is abusive, and so they do an emergency custody change over to your dad. Obviously, there's an emergency custody change, and that doesn't take 12 months to process. So why isn't the same thing taken into consideration for those who get emancipated? This could be something that blows up over a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and you're saying that this child can't go through the emergency measures because you have to be living outside of your parents' houses for over a year. And I think that that is not okay. This also directly attacks those with poor socioeconomic status because they may not have access to the resources needed to get out of their parents' houses. They may not have family members who have the resources to support them as well as their other kids, or just support them, period. It's not the rich white people who this is affecting. This is affecting the poor socioeconomic status or people of color. And the third statute that I have a problem with is that blank receives a steady income through gainful legal employment, which they have maintained for a period of over 1 year. Now, I don't necessarily have a huge problem with this statute. It's just that this could lead to EMFAP being a problem. Having this statute means that you have to be financially secure, which I am financially secure. I lived in my own apartment for a year. I supported myself. The thing about this program is that the creation of this and the access to this should not inhibit you from being emancipated. Just like how adults in everyday life go get SNAP benefits and get TANF benefits and medical insurance through the state, they don't get their adult status stripped from them because they're seeking social welfare. I don't think that minors who seek assistance through EMFAP should be taken of that status either because they are seeking help. It's not feasible to expect a full-time high school student to work the same amount of hours and make the same kind of money that full-time adults do. And even when they do, full-time adults still struggle supporting themselves and sometimes end up living with their parents. So it's a very important issue that we need to take into consideration. I propose that we address the ramifications of these statutes and possibly just in state federal statutes so that each emancipated minor or minor who wants to seek emancipation has the same level playing field.
Addressing this further, I think it's wrong that a minor may be inhibited from getting emancipated due to a statute that only their state upholds. I think that if we have federal statutes, this would allow equality among minors who are seeking emancipation. I think it would be weird if a minor would be denied emancipation in one state but could go live in another state and be granted emancipation.
So the last thing I want to address is the alarming statistics of emancipated minors. Like I have said before, there's not a lot of statistics on emancipated minors, so this has been really hard to research. However, I did find one article, and this was an article found on a study to interview 18 different emancipated minors in Northern California. This was done by Carol Sanger, and it's titled Minor Changes, Emancipating Children in Modern Times. And it was published in Juvenile Law Commons, Volume 25, Number 2, published in 1992, pages 239 to 355. So I first want to give this quote that was in the article. Quote, The study was prompted by an offhand remark. During a social conversation with one of the authors, a 50-year-old woman volunteered that in order for her and her new husband to begin their marriage without the complicating presence of stepchildren, they had to emancipate her 16-year-old daughter. And then another quote I have from that is, quote, "In 20th century English, emancipate is not used as a transitive verb. The California legislature intended emancipation to be a legal status that minors request, not a legal imposition to be thrust upon them by someone else." These quotes open a whole new can of worms, let me tell you. Now, according to Chris Wu, who was the director of legal services for children, 75% of the phone calls that were made to his office in regards to emancipation were made on behalf of the minor seeking services parents. And this is just honestly heartbreaking because, like this article says, this is not something that should just be thrusted upon teenagers. It should be done by minors who would truly benefit from this. It should be their idea. It shouldn't be something that their parents insist must happen because their parents are just tired of having those responsibilities. According to some statistics from the study, 28% of the emancipated minors that they interviewed were employed. That means 72% of those minors were unemployed. And then 78% of the emancipated minors dropped out of high school due to their emancipation. And that's just disheartening. These statistics may reflect the struggles emancipated youth face across the country. And I personally find the high school dropout rate the most disheartening because I can't imagine the amount of struggle that someone has to go through as an emancipated minor to drop out of high school. I mean, that's never crossed my mind. So I can't even imagine what other emancipated minors have had to face that I haven't, that I've had the luxury to not have to experience. So, to recap, I described how U.S. social policy was constructed, how it was financed, child abuse, the issues within the foster care system, the emancipation process, and the struggles that emancipated minors face. The conditions that I described further strengthen the point that emancipated minors need our help. The conditions that I described at the foster care system, those can be avoided by older adolescents who have the mental means to go through the process of emancipation and benefit from it. But they may be reluctant to go through that process because they believe they won't be able to be financially secure by just working 1 or 2 part-time jobs. We go through a long, complicated process to take charge of our life and now face seemingly similar conditions that we tried to escape from. So, while on this journey, I crafted an application process that includes an application, how they'll be reviewed, which is holistically. The funds will be distributed on a first-come, first-served basis until they are depleted for the year, and this all could be distributed through the United States Department of Health and Human Services. If you are struggling on what you can do to help this mission, you can spread the word about EMFAP. I want to get this on the floor of the House of Representatives. I want to talk to legislators. Share this video with legislators. Share this video with officials who can help this happen. We need to come together and lobby for the implementation of this program to ensure that these cycles do not continue. We need to help our vulnerable and obscure.